I used to be a standard, overworked vet in the real world until I literally pulled an all-nighter doing animal surgeries and dropped dead. Rest in peace to me, right? But instead of hitting the pearly gates, the universe signed me up for a second shift in a horror game. Because I have zero chill and standard issue overachiever syndrome, I was so insanely dedicated to my new life as an NPC that the higher-ups promoted me to a mini-boss in no time. They even handed me my very own game zone. But look, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't do the whole murderous bloodbath aesthetic. So, I named my zone Pet Paradise, set the difficulty slider to super easy, and made the winning objective literally just saving animals. Players loved it. Easiest loot of their lives. When I had free time, I naturally defaulted back to my vet roots. To get the word out about my new shop, I spent my off hours handing out flyers across different game zones like a desperate small business owner, accidentally making friends with all the local sleep paralysis demons along the way. My very first customer was Grandma Koo from the Happy Community Zone next door. She shuffled into the shop with her cane, and I immediately hit her with my best customer service voice. "Grandma Koo, welcome in. What brings you by?" She sighed, looking totally stressed. "Oh, dear. It's my cat, Mimi." Lately, her appetite has dropped. She's super lethargic, and I'm worried she's sick. But since I'm a monster, I can't exactly walk into a human vet clinic, you know? "Bring her out. Let me take a look," I said. Grandma Koo gestured outside, and in walked a literal, massive, 600-pound Siberian tiger. It strutted right up to me, thick as a brick, looking at me with the most head-empty, pure eyes you've ever seen. I slowly pointed at it, my jaw hitting the floor. Grandma Koo? That's Mimi?" "Okay, sure." I was terrified for half a second, but then the brain rot took over. I've been a vet for years, and I have never gotten to work on an actual apex predator. Talk about a resume builder. Except we had a massive logistical issue. This giant unit took up my entire lobby. There was zero space for equipment. My x-ray machine couldn't even capture a single paw. I scratched my head, laughing awkwardly. "So, Grandma, any chance you can, scale Mimi down a bit?" Grandma Koo nodded, cast some spell, and poof. The giant killer tiger shrank down into a squishy, oversized orange cat. Much better. Now we're cooking. Mimi was an absolute angel, flopping right onto the x-ray table like a good girl. A few minutes later, the scans came back. I looked at the images, then looked at Grandma Koo. "All right, Grandma, good news and bad news. The reason Mimi is sluggish? She's completely stuffed. Backed up. Her stomach is full of undigested food, and honestly, she's carrying a full load of poop." Grandma Koo gasped. "How could that be? Grandma, be honest with me. How much are you feeding her?" Just 20 pounds of meat a day. And Mimi is such a good girl. She licks the bowl clean every single time." I stared at her in utter disbelief. 20 pounds of meat? This is the universal grandma thinks you're starving phenomenon, but on lethal monster steroids. "Okay, listen to me," I wheezed. 10 pounds max. We're cutting her off. I prescribed some digestive meds and handed them over. As soon as we finished, Mimi randomly leaped into my arms, leaned into my ear, and softly meowed, basically asking me for a low-key favor. Before I could even process what this tiger cat was asking, Grandma Koo whipped out a plastic bag stuffed with cash. I held up my hands and refused the money. "Look, the monster realm isn't like the real world. If a tiger is a domestic pet here, who knows what kind of apocalyptic beasts other monsters are walking around with?" Instead of cash, I asked Grandma Koo to help me set up an enchantment on the shop. The second any animal steps foot inside my store, it automatically shrinks down to standard pet size. Boom. Problem solved. Now running a vet clinic is actually manageable. Flash forward to a few nights later. I got woken up by somebody practically trying to kick my door down. A girl's voice was screaming outside, sounding totally panicked. Duty called, so I dragged myself out of bed, threw on my lab coat, and yanked the door open. Standing there was a teenage girl drenched in blood, but she didn't care about her own wounds. She grabbed my hands, shaking like a leaf. "Grandma Koo told me you heal animals. Doctor, please, you have to save my dog." She was literally about to drop to her knees and beg. I looked past her shoulder and, Jesus Christ, standing behind her was a three-headed nightmare straight out of Greek mythology. The thing was easily 16 feet long, looking like Cerberus on bad steroids. It was covered in deep, bleeding puncture wounds, and one of its heads had a brutal slash going straight down to the bone. "No time to talk. Get him inside," I yelled. The second Cerberus crossed the threshold. My enchantment kicked in. Poof! Massive hellhound instantly turned into a cute, terrified golden retriever. Seeing her terrifying beast turn into a helpless little pup made the girl burst into tears. We rushed him straight into the operating room. I grabbed my scalpel and thread, got to work, cleaning the wounds, stopping the bleeding, and stitching him up. The poor guy was hit with fatal intent. Every single strike was meant to kill. It took me 2 grueling hours of straight surgical focus to stitch every wound shut. I finally walked out of the ore, wiping the sweat off my forehead. The girl sprang up, eyes wide. "Is he?" "Breathe," I smiled. Surgery was a total success. He fainted from severe blood loss, but as long as he pulls through tonight, he'll be good as new. The girl let out a massive sigh of relief, grabbing my hands and drowning me in thank yous. That's when I noticed she was still actively bleeding out from her own side. "Hey, you're not looking so hot yourself," I noted gently. "If you trust me, I can patch you up real quick." She looked no older than 17 or 18. I couldn't help but wonder how a monster NPC got wrecked this badly. As I cleaned and bandaged her wounds, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What happened to you guys out there?" She looked down, her voice trembling. "My name is Shixi. I'm an NPC from the Hell Zone. Tonight, a squad of human players invaded. They didn't even care about the quest. They just started hacking and slashing through every NPC they saw. Every time someone died, they'd start high-fiving and screaming, 'Hell yeah, another 100 points.'" Tears began streaming down her face again. "I'm just a low-level NPC. A whole squad jumped me. I couldn't fight back. But then my dog, he threw himself over me. He tucked me into his mouth and used his own body to tank all the damage for me. He held out until the main boss finally showed up and chased the players away." Man, hearing that hit me right in the feels. Turns out, some of these human players are absolute trash human beings. If a squad like that ever steps foot into my zone, oh boy, I'm personally making sure they don't respawn. To change the subject and stop her from crying, I asked, "So, how did you two end up together anyway?" Shixi's eyes softened up real quick. "I've raised him since he was a puppy. We actually died together in a car crash in the real world and spawned here into this horror game. But because I was so weak, players constantly bullied me. He suffered so much just trying to keep me safe." She paused, swallowing hard. "One day, he almost died protecting me. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to give him away to the main boss of our zone, thinking at least under a boss's protection, he'd be safe. But he ran away. And when he came back," she sobbed, "he went to a mad scientist and begged him to modify his body. He willingly turned himself into a terrifying monster, just so he'd be strong enough to protect me. He literally told me, 'Shixi, I don't care if I become a monster, as long as you're safe. I'm gonna be the strongest monster in the game, so no player will ever touch you again, bro.'" I literally pulled out a tissue and blew my nose so loud it echoed. "Okay, that is the sweetest thing I've ever heard. Don't worry, Shixi. I will get him back to 100%. He's gonna have to stay here at the clinic for a few days to recover, but you can come visit him after your shift every day." After that whole ordeal with Shixi and her dog, I couldn't shake off this terrible gut feeling. Those Sweatlord players were getting reckless. They were definitely going to strike again. So, whenever I went out to hand out shop flyers, I started warning all the local NPCs. "Hey guys, heads up. If you see a group of try-hard players acting shady, do not try to be a hero. Just run." Thanks to my heads up, a ton of NPCs actually managed to dodge player ganks. And to show their appreciation, they started swarming my store to support my business. I mean, the NPCs with pets made sense. But then the petless monsters started showing up, buying bags of cat food and dog kibble by the armful. I looked at a giant demon hoarding 6 bags of kibble. "Bro, you don't even have a pet. What are you buying cat food for?" The monsters just grinned back at me. "Oh, just gonna feed the stray cats and dogs in the neighborhood." They kept making up ridiculous excuses while shoving as much pet gear into their arms as humanly possible, refusing to leave until their hands were completely full. And just like that, peace returned to the horror game. My pet shop was finally humming along nicely. So one day, I was just hanging out, restocking the shelves with chew toys, when suddenly this loud, ominous hissing echoed from outside. The sky literally went pitch black. I stopped for a second, like, wait, is it raining? I stepped outside to check it out, and the next millisecond, a tongue the size of a city bus whipped past my face. 2 glowing crimson eyes, the size of beanbags, stared down at me from above the trees, radiating pure cold-blooded murder energy. I almost fainted right then and there. Which top-tier boss left their pet unleashed? This gigantic python was literally coiling itself around my whole storefront. One tight squeeze, and my entire business would have been reduced to toothpicks. My heart was practically doing tap dance routines in my chest, but I held my composure together like a champ. "Hey there, big guy," I squeaked, sweating bullets. "Are you here to buy some treats? Or do you need a doctor?" The giant snake hissed loudly. "Can you actually heal me?" Yeah. If you're here for a checkup, just use the front door." The monster python slithered down from the roof, and the moment it crossed the threshold, zap. My shop's magic enchantment kicked right in. It shrank down into a tiny, pretty little yellow and green garden snake. Except, why was this garden snake built like a literal water pitcher? It had severe rolls. The chubby little snake started looking around the store with total curiosity. It slithered right over to Little Dog's recovery bed and just stared at him. Now, Little Dog was technically sleeping, but I could tell he was totally fake sleeping. The poor guy was shiver-shaking under his blanket, absolutely terrified of this chubby noodle. I leaned down. "So, where's your owner?" The snake scoffed, holding its head high. "Owner? I am the majestic king of all snakes. I don't need an owner." I blinked, totally confused. Before I could process that, Little Dog peeked one eye open and whispered under his breath, "Dude, don't mess with him. He's the king of snakes from the Terror Snake Island zone. Those snakes are ruthless. Don't get him mad." The snake shot Little Dog a terrifying side-eye, and Little Dog instantly slammed his eyes shut, back to fake sleeping for his life. "Oh, so you're a wild snake," I said. "All right then, Your Majesty. What seems to be the problem?" "My mouth hurts like crazy," the Snake King whined, dropping the tough guy routine. "And I keep getting dizzy. Every time I stand up too fast, everything goes pitch black. People said you can cure anything, so inspect the royal physique. A snake with severe orthostatic hypotension? Incredible. All right, Snake King, let's start with a basic checkup. Open wide." He opened up, and yikes. The inside of his mouth was all inflamed and ulcerated. Pure stomatitis. I swapped some fluids with a Q-tip and drew a little blood to run in the lab. When the results came back, I was baffled. Not only did he have a nasty bacterial mouth infection, but his cholesterol levels were through the roof, which made zero sense. Mouth infections make it way too painful to eat, yet this guy was somehow morbidly obese with high blood fat. "Your mouth must have been hurting for at least a month," I said, eyeing the lab sheet. "How are you still eating enough to be this thick?" The Snake King let out a heavy sigh. "Because my minions are utterly useless. I have to do everything myself. Every week, the game drops at least 100 human players into my zone. All they have to do is survive for 10 days to win. But do they hide? No. They started hunting my nest for snake eggs because of some stupid rumor that eating a snake egg gives you superhuman gains. They were hunting the mother snakes and stealing the eggs daily." He huffed, dramatically rolling his eyes. "So as the king, I had to patrol 24/7. Whenever I caught a player stealing eggs, I had to constrict them to death. And to intimidate the rest of those sweatlords, I forced myself to swallow every single player whole, despite the excruciating mouth pain. I only came here today because the players finally chilled out a bit. Man, heavy is the head that wears the crown, huh? Even monster bosses have corporate stress." I grabbed a bottle of boric acid solution, disinfected his swollen mouth, slathered on some healing ointment, and gave him strict instructions. "You need this ointment applied twice a day." Then I turned to Little Dog. "Hey, Little Dog, since you're feeling better, you're on snake ointment duty." Little Dog instantly lifted his head, looking at me with absolute despair, wanting to refuse so badly but not daring to cross me. "Hey, I'm a solo business owner running a whole clinic. I had 2 patients and 0 staff. Little Dog was just going to have to cope for a few days." Next up, the Snake King's strict calorie deficit regimen. I put him on a low-fat, low-carb diet, tightly controlling his intake. Every single day, he would circle around me, whining, "I'm starving, Doc. I'm literally dying." But my heart was as cold as a stone. To try and break me, he somehow found a real-world cookbook and started reading recipes out loud in my ear all day long. Honestly, it backfired because I started drooling listening to it. I hadn't eaten real human food since I died and started working in this game. So after my shift that night, when the monster next door mentioned that someone opened a street food stall selling Chinese egg-stuffed crepes in the central hub, I practically sprinted over there. I ordered the ultimate deluxe crepe, and oh man, it hit exactly like the ones back in the real world. Pure perfection. From that day on, getting a crepe after work became my daily ritual, and the Snake King, who tagged along everywhere, became a fellow addict of human junk food. During all this, Mimi the tiger cat dropped by the shop again. She cryptically asked me to help her find an orange cat that looked just like her. I had no idea what she was planning, but I agreed anyway. Maybe she just wanted a pet of her own? Monsters are weird like that. Then came another slow day at the shop, when an absurdly stunning creature walked through the front door. It was Muley, the legendary siren boss from the Siren Seduction Zone. But before Muley could even say hi, tears started pouring down his gorgeous face like rain. "Doctor," Muley sobbed dramatically. "I think I have a terminal illness. I'm going to die. I tried going to a human hospital in the player realm, but they refused me because I'm a merman. They told me to go find a vet." I thought about it for a second. Honestly, the human hospital wasn't wrong. Mermaids and humans are structurally pretty different. I gently patted Muley's back to calm him down. "Hey, it's okay. I am a vet." "Tell me what's going on." Muli sniffled loudly. Lately, I've been feeling this overwhelming, burning heat all over my body. My mood is completely down in the gutters, and my scales are starting to fall off. I read an ancient book, and it said these are symptoms of an incurable plague. I'm done for. Now, I'd never treated a merman before, but fish are fish, right? Let's do a full scan first, I suggested. Muli nodded, transformed into a gorgeous, shiny koi fish, and hopped onto the exam table. But after running all the tests, I just stood there in total silence. His vitals were pristine. Blood work? Perfect. He was literally a prime young adult fish in the absolute peak of his life. 0 diseases. So why was he feeling burning heat and mood swings? Was his internal fire too high? I'm an MD, not a traditional medicine guru, so I scratched my head. Then suddenly, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Wait, Muli? I asked slowly. Are you in heat? I mean, it was spring. Peak mating season for animals. Even if his top half looks human, biologically, he's still part aquatic wildlife. Muli blinked his big eyes, looking completely lost. What does in heat mean? Wait, didn't your parents ever give you the birds and the bees talk about how merfolk reproduce? I asked. The moment I mentioned family, Muli's eyes went dim. I don't have a family, he murmured softly. Human players captured them all years ago. I never saw them again. Abort. Abort. I literally wanted to slap myself in the face. Nice job. Big mouth. Way to rub salt in the trauma. To fix my massive blunder, I dragged Muli around to ask the oldest, most experienced monster NPCs in the game. And yep, every single veteran NPC confirmed it. Muli was just going through standard fish mating season heat. I looked at him with a super conflicted expression. Look, man, being in heat isn't something I can prescribe a pill for. You either need to find a distraction, or Muli looked at me blankly. Distraction? Like what? I don't know what to do. I leaned in, my eyes sparkling with absolute, unrestrained professional excitement, my voice dropping an octave. Well, I could just neuter you. I'm not gonna lie. Back in my real-world vet days, I was the undisputed king of snipping testicles. A local shelter girl literally gifted me a custom plaque once that read, "The Ballbuster Extraordinaire." I slowly lowered my gaze down his tail, unable to hide the sheer hype in my voice. I mean, sure, you're a merman, I continued, winking. But anatomical structure-wise, fish are fish, right? Muli's eyes went wide as saucers. He literally took 10 giant leaps backward, gasping for air. Thank you, Dr. Lin, but I feel totally cured. Like 100% healed. Actually, I think my house is on fire right now, so I gotta go. Bye. And just like that, he bolted out the door like his tail was on fire. I covered my mouth to muffle my snickering. Poor little guppy. So easily spooked. Right after Muli's dramatic exit, Grandma Koo shuffled into the shop with Mimi on a leash. Dr. Lin, dear, she said, looking super excited. Our Happy Community Zone is going on a mandatory team-building retreat, and Mimi is way too noticeable to bring along. Do you think you could pet sit her for a few days? I took the leash with a smile. Oh, absolutely, Grandma Koo. Have an awesome trip. And just like that, I added another furry freeloading tenant to my shop. A couple days later, I had just finished taking out Little Dog's surgical stitches and was prepping the Snake King's strict low-fat meal, when suddenly, kaboom, my front door was literally blown into smithereens. Smoke filled the room, and a bunch of try-hard human players strolled in, carrying heavy artillery like they owned the place. Yep, that's her, one guy yelled, pointing a finger at me. She's the one spreading warning messages to all the NPCs. Because of her, our guild couldn't farm a single kill this week. We're so broke right now, people are literally dueling to the death over a common white-tier item. The guild leader, a guy with a massive scar across his face, stepped forward, letting out a loud, obnoxious laugh. Pfft, please. She's just a mini-boss in a beginner-level starter zone. One explosive shell from my launcher and I can send her straight to the respawn screen. The players behind him started cheering like frat boys. Boss is built different. Boss is him. But Scarface raised a hand, smirking evilly. Nah, hold up. This chick made our guild broke for weeks. Ending her quickly is way too merciful. We gotta make her suffer so bad she regrets ever messing with us. Look at all these helpless animals in her shop. Let's start with them. Hey, Lee. Tie her up. Make her watch what happens when you mess with the top dogs. Player Lee immediately pulled out a glowing binding item and lunged at me. I tried to throw hands and fight back, but after a few quick maneuvers, he caught me off guard and wrapped me up tight in magical ropes. I yanked with all my strength, but I couldn't break free. Wait a minute. With the stats these players were flexing, there was zero chance they were supposed to be matched in a low-level starter zone like mine. These griefers definitely used some shady exploit to trick the system server. Scarface dragged a chair over, sat down like a mob boss, crossed his legs, and barked orders. Whoever kills these animals first gets the bounty points. Player Lee, eager to suck up to his boss, was the first to step forward. He swaggered right up to Little Dog. Little Dog started low growling, and my heart instantly sank into my stomach. No. He literally just got his stitches out. If he moves too aggressively, those wounds are gonna rip right back open. Player Lee sneered. Look at the little doggy trying to be tough. Let me teach you a lesson, beast. He spawned a heavy wooden baseball bat out of thin air and swung it full force right at Little Dog's head. Luckily, Little Dog was fast. He dodged sideways just in time. The other players erupted into howling laughter at Lee, missing his shot. Embarrassed and furious, Lee yelled, "Stun lock," and threw a crowd control item that froze Little Dog in place. Then, he pulled out a combat knife and viciously stabbed Little Dog straight in the back leg. Blood spurted everywhere. My eyes went instantly bloodshot with pure rage. Little Dog had lost so much blood during his first surgery, and we had just barely gotten his energy back. Seeing him hurt again made me want to rip these players apart. Luckily, Little Dog managed to break out of the stun effect a second later and scrambled up onto a high shelf to hide. Meanwhile, another player sneaked around behind Mimi and grabbed her tight by the scruff of her neck. Mimi was currently in her small orange cat form, so no matter how wildly she squirmed and hissed, she couldn't break his grip. I went completely feral, screaming and putting every ounce of strength into snapping these stupid ropes. Scarface walked up, slapped my cheek condescendingly, and shoved a hunting knife deep into my stomach. Blood started pooling out, and he just stood there laughing as the rest of his squad cheered like absolute psychos, throwing nets and stun bombs everywhere to catch Little Dog. Mimi barely dodged another player's blade, using her claws to swipe across a guy's face before scrambling away. Through the blinding pain in my gut, I frantically scanned the room for the Snake King. Please tell me he hid somewhere. Don't let these monsters get him. That's when I spotted him near the broken doorway. The chubby little garden snake was slithering toward the exit as fast as his little scales could carry him. Wait, a light bulb went off in my head. These human players didn't know about the shop's anti-size spell. They had no idea that the second an animal steps outside those doors, the spell breaks and they return to their original, terrifying true forms. Stop him. Scarface scoffed, spotting the snake. You think you can escape? Not on my watch. He took a step toward the door and then froze. The entire room went dead silent. The chubby little yellow snake had just crossed the threshold. The second it touched the outside pavement, the spell vanished. Boom. His body exploded in size, ballooning exponentially into a colossal, apocalyptic forest serpent. He coiled his massive body all around the outside of the building, his terrifying, glowing crimson eyes staring down at the players inside like they were tiny, squishy insects. The entire sun was blocked out. Darkness blanketed the room. A chill ran down everyone's spine. One of the players' knees literally buckled, his voice shaking violently. Wait, is that the 3 S-Class Snake King from Terror Snake Island? The one that ate half our raid squad last month? Shut up. Stop capping. Another player shrieked, totally panicked. The Snake King has been missing for weeks. Why would a legendary 3 S-Class boss show up in a trash-tier starter zone? You're losing your mind. Despite his tough words, I could see Scarface trembling from head to toe. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold his weapons. Panic turned to pure malice. He spun around and stabbed me in the gut again. Is this your doing, you little glitch? He screamed. I gasped out loud, screaming in agony. The second I cried out, Mimi's fur stood completely on end, and Little Dog leaped down. Both of them stood right in front of me, growling aggressively, shielding my bleeding body with theirs. I tried to keep my voice steady. Little Dog, Mimi, listen to me. Run outside. The second you get outside, you'll get your full power back. But neither of them moved an inch. They stayed locked in front of me, refusing to leave my side. Inside, the players were paralyzed with fear, terrified that stepping outside meant instant death. Scarface's brain worked overtime, trying to cope. Don't panic. As long as we stay inside the shop building, the Snake King can't get us. The doorway is too small for his huge head. If we just stay inside and kill this zone boss, we can force clear the stage and teleport out. They thought the shop walls would protect them, but the Snake King was not about to play by their rules. From the outside, the giant serpent began to constrict his body around the building, tightening his grip like a hydraulic press. Crack. The ceiling beams started snapping. Heavy stone blocks and plaster rained down from above. Shatter. Every single glass window imploded inward, sending sharp shards flying across the room. My heart broke into a million pieces. My shop. I put so much work into decorating this place, and now it's getting turned into rubble. Within seconds, the entire building collapsed. As the thick dust and smoke began to clear, a massive, 600-pound Siberian tiger emerged from the rubble, bearing its razor-sharp fangs, and right beside her stood a massive, 16-foot, three-headed Cerberus hellhound, all three heads dripping acidic drool, glaring at the players with pure, unadulterated vengeance. Before the squad could even process the horror, Little Dog lunged forward. One of his heads clamped its jaws tight around Scarface's torso. Scarface whipped out a Gatling gun, firing frantically into Little Dog's face, but the bullets literally bounced off his hide like harmless pebbles. Before Scarface could even reload, Little Dog's second head snapped down, bit Scarface's head off, and swallowed him whole. The entire squad's mental state completely shattered into pieces. Their highest geared, max-level leader didn't even last 1 second against this beast. "What is this game mode?" a player screamed, crying hysterically. "This is supposed to be a level 1 starter zone. Why is there a 3 S-Class Snake King and a 1 S-Class Hellhound here? And that tiger isn't a normal animal either," another yelled. I saw it in the Happy Community Zone. It slaughtered a dozen high-level players in a single night. We got baited. The boss of this zone isn't a weak NPC. She's a god-tier hidden raid boss. Her minions are already annihilating us. If she actually fights us herself, we're all gonna get wiped out with 0 survivor credit. Run for your lives. The players completely threw away their weapons and scattered in total chaos, trying to escape. But the Snake King had already coiled his massive body around the perimeter like a 20-foot-tall, impenetrable fortress wall. No one was getting out. Player Lee pulled out a flying mount item, trying to launch himself over the snake's body. But the second he lifted even 3 feet off the ground, Mimi's eyes locked onto him. Now, remember, Mimi might be a giant 600-pound Siberian tiger, but at the end of the day, she's still a cat. And like any regular domestic house cat, she absolutely loves jumping at fast-moving, flying toys. Mimi's eyes dilated into massive black circles, sparkling with pure predatory excitement. Mimi's predatory instincts kicked into hyperdrive. She wiggled her back, daily driver hind legs, built up speed, and straight up launched her 600-pound body into the stratosphere. She caught player Lee mid-air and slammed him down to the ground like a rag doll. Bam. A single swipe of a giant tiger paw carries at least a couple 100 pounds of raw force, and you could literally hear his ribs splintering into dust. Lee was left lying there with a caved-in chest, wheezing out his absolute final breaths. 2 body drops in under 2 minutes, killed like they were nothing. The rest of the squad instantly lost all their tough guy confidence. Some of them straight up dropped their weapons, fell to their knees, and started desperately groveling to Little Dog and Mimi, begging for mercy. Except, bad choice of ambassador, because the player kneeling the fastest was the exact same dude who had originally suggested torturing Mimi for bonus points. Mimi isn't dumb. She recognized his face instantly and flattened him into literal paste with one heavy stomp. Seeing that begging was totally useless, half the surviving players collapsed onto the floor, paralyzed with pure dread. But a couple of reckless sweatlords tried to pull out their ultimate moves for a final standoff. The Snake King didn't even give them the chance to cast a spell. He whipped his giant head forward, sunk his massive venomous fangs straight into a player's abdomen, and injected gallons of lethal toxin until the dude turned completely purple. Then, the giant python tilted his head back and swallowed the guy whole. I was freaking out. I scrambled right onto the Snake King's gigantic head and started slapping his scales for dear life. "Hey, are you insane?" I yelled into his massive ear. "You have high cholesterol. I told you, no junk food. You can't just go around eating toxic players. Plus, do you have any idea how much bacteria is crawling on that guy? Do you want your mouth infection to get cured or not? Spit him out. Spit him out right now. Hawk it up." The Snake King let out a massive, wet gag and literally regurgitated the slimy, covered in mucus player right back onto the dirt. Meanwhile, Mimi and Little Dog swept through the rest of the squad like a tornado. The whole raid battle didn't even last 5 minutes. Honestly, calling it a fight is a joke. It was a complete and total one-sided extermination. I sat on top of the Snake King's head, staring down at the absolute wreckage of my clinic, and let out a huge, heavy sigh. As I was mourning my property value, Mimi started digging through the rubble and pulled out a tiny, skin and bones, stray orange kitten I'd rescued from another zone a few days prior. Man, I almost completely forgot about her. When the players first blew up my front door, this little kitten had slipped out through the back alley to hide. Mimi gently picked up the tiny kitten with her teeth and placed her right into my open palm. I looked at Mimi, totally confused. "Wait, Mimi, why did you ask me to find a stray orange kitten that looks just like you in the first place?" Mimi leaned close to my ear, whispered a few quiet words, and then turned around, walking away into the dark forest without looking back once. The next day, Grandma Koo came back from her neighborhood retreat. When she arrived, my shop was still just a pile of smoking debris. I didn't want her worrying about the player attack, so I decided to walk over to her house in the happy community zone instead. Grandma Koo welcomed me inside with a huge smile. Her house was so cozy and warm, covered wall to wall with framed photos of her and Mimi chilling together over the years. Looking at all those pictures, it hit me. So this is what a cat lady looks like in the afterlife. I held out the tiny, fast-asleep orange kitten to her, feeling so guilty I couldn't even look her in the eye. I didn't have the heart to tell her that Mimi had left for good, and honestly, Mimi never even told me where she was going. Grandma Koo gently took the sleeping kitten from my arms and tucked her into a freshly washed, sun-warmed cat bed. I was hoping she wouldn't notice anything off for at least a few days, but I completely underestimated a owner's intuition. Even though I had asked Muley the merman to use a little magic to make this stray kitten look identical to Mimi's miniature form, Grandma Koo took one look and instantly knew it wasn't her. I stood there stuttering, unable to form a real sentence. But this was actually what Mimi had begged me to do before she left. Mimi knew her time was coming to an end. She was reaching the end of her monster lifespan, and she didn't want Grandma Koo to watch her pass away and break her heart. I was fully prepared for Grandma Koo to get mad or kick me out, but instead, she just gently took my hand. "Let's go find her," she said softly. We walked for a really long time, deep into the darkest, most secluded part of the forest, and there she was. Mimi was curled up under a massive ancient tree, totally still. She didn't even notice us approaching at first. "Mimi," Grandma Koo called out softly. Mimi's eyes snapped open. She turned her head, saw Grandma Koo standing there, and real tears started pouring down her fur. In veterinary medicine, animals don't cry tears out of sadness. Tears are just an involuntary physical response to flush out dust or infection. I used to be a total skeptic about pets crying from emotions, but watching this giant tiger weeping under a tree, I believed it. Mimi threw her heavy head right into Grandma Koo's lap. Grandma Koo just sat there, gently stroking her head over and over, whispering comforting words. Turns out, back when Mimi was alive in the human world, she had been brutally murdered by illegal poachers. When she spawned into this horror game as a monster, she hated humans with a burning passion, slaughtering every player she saw and hiding alone in the woods. It wasn't until Grandma Koo found her that she finally let her guard down and learned to trust someone again. I looked down, feeling a heavy knot in my throat. "Grandma Koo? Do monster NPCs die a second time?" "Of course, dear," Grandma Koo replied softly. "Every monster's life is finite here. Otherwise, the game wouldn't be able to update its servers and rotate new zones. That's the rule set by the system. So, when a monster dies here, do they just disappear forever?" Grandma Koo shook her head with a gentle smile. "As long as we remember them, they never truly disappear." And she was right. As long as we kept Mimi in our hearts, she'd live on forever. Grandma Koo held Mimi for hours and hours. Mimi curled up in her lap, purring softly, her eyes closed in total peace, until she quietly took her final breath and faded into glowing particles of light. Grandma Koo stayed there until dawn broke over the horizon. She finally stood up, dusted off her clothes, looked at me, and smiled. "Let's head home, dear." Grandma Koo threw a beautiful, intimate memorial service for Mimi. I honestly didn't expect many people to show up, but a huge crowd of local monsters came by to pay their respects to the legendary tiger. But party crowds always disperse eventually. When everyone left and Grandma Koo walked back into her empty home, full of Mimi's favorite toys and scratch posts, she finally broke down, holding her face in her hands and crying uncontrollably. Suddenly, the little stray orange kitten trotted out from the bedroom. She climbed up onto the sofa, rubbed her little head against Grandma Koo's hand, and curled up right against her chest, trying her best to comfort her. Grandma Koo sniffled, wiped her tears with the kitten's soft fur, and held her tight. It took me 3 whole months, but I finally rebuilt my pet shop from scratch. And out of nowhere, the system notified me that my Pet Paradise Zone difficulty rating got bumped up from beginner to intermediate. I was super confused. Wait, my individual combat stats didn't even level up. How did the zone difficulty double? But the game system didn't give me any explanations, so I just rolled with it, juggling try-hard players while running my clinic daily. For some reason, after the big fight, having a pet became the ultimate trend among local monsters. Suddenly, monsters from all over the map were coming in with the most absurd creatures you've ever seen. Flying beasts, underground crawlers, deep-sea aquatic pets. You name it, they had it. One monster literally brought in a plain gray rock and called it his pet. He was browsing pet supplies when a player walked up and started pointing and laughing at him. "Bro, are you mentally ill? You're buying pet gear for a literal useless rock?" The monster didn't say a word. He just picked up the rock and screamed, "Go, Rocky, use tackle," and smashed the rock straight through the player's skull. Needless to say, no player ever made fun of pet rocks again. And honestly, I didn't dare say anything either, in case he decided to launch Rocky at my forehead. The shop got so insanely busy that I couldn't handle the workload alone anymore. So, I dragged Muley, the Siren Merman, over to work as my assistant. On his very first day on the job, Muley almost killed my special magical land plants by pouring buckets of salt water straight onto their roots. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I gently grabbed his wet hands and taught him step by step how to distinguish between freshwater and land-dwelling flora. Turns out, he was an absolute natural. Thanks to his innate siren charm, he had a super calming aura that instantly relaxed all the aquatic pets, and he kept the entire store inventory organized down to a T. Having him around took a massive weight off my shoulders. I stuck to my original calling as the head vet, spending my days surrounded by mythical creatures, weird beasts, and glowing animals. Over time, Muley and I developed an incredible flow. I handled the medical diagnoses and surgeries, while he managed the aquatic pets, customer service, and daily logistics. 5 whole years flew by in the blink of an eye. Thanks to their shared love for pets, the monsters across all game zones became more united than ever before. Sweatlord players didn't even dare to cause trouble in the open anymore, and my humble little pet clinic officially became the most iconic, universally respected safe haven in the entire horror game. And honestly, that tiny, humble little shop became the ultimate legendary safe haven in the entire horror game universe. Muley and I kept running the clinic side by side, keeping the routine alive. Little Dog's old battle injuries were completely cured. The traumatized Cerberus that once had to tank catastrophic damage and bleed out just to keep his owner alive was finally done fighting. Now, he didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his 3 heads anymore. He just got to hang out, live stress-free, and comfortably guard Shixie like the goodest boy in existence. Meanwhile, the Snake King completely cut ties with his toxic past. He officially dumped his King of All Snakes title and never stepped foot back into that brutal, endless deathmatch over at the Terror Snake Island zone. Once his nasty mouth infection was fully healed, he gave up the throne, handed in his resignation letter to the game, and made my shop his permanent retirement home. Of course, he still kept his sassy, main character energy. Every single day, he'd wait by his bowl right on schedule, demanding his custom low-fat meals like a spoiled diva. But once he finished eating, he'd just slither over to the front porch, stretch out, and catch some rays in the sun. If any low-level punk monster or reckless player even thought about starting trouble near our store, the Snake King would just lazily flick his tongue and drop a fraction of his 3S class boss aura, and boom, instant retreat. He basically became our ultimate, undisputed store mascot and security system. Standing by the front door, Muley and I watched the Snake King lazying around in the sunlight. Out of nowhere, Muley subtly leaned in a little closer to me, close enough that I could feel the gentle warmth radiating off him. Looking at him, then looking back at our cozy little shop, it hit me. Through every coming day and every dark night, we're going to keep holding down the fort right here, protecting our furry, scaly, and mythical little family. In a realm completely consumed by horror, bloodbaths, and nightmare monsters, we managed to build our own tiny pocket of pure warmth and comfort, and we were going to keep that spark burning forever. As evening rolled in, I kicked back on my rocking chair, watching the blood-red sun slowly set over the horror game horizon. I took a deep breath, took a sip of my drink, and smiled to myself. You know what? Dying from overwork and getting reincarnated into a nightmare survival game wasn't actually half bad after all.